prove the identity secant theta minus 1 divided by 1 minus cosine theta is equal to secant theta. The general strategy with proving an identity is to choose either the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the identity, perform algebra on that expression, hoping to get to the other side. The strategy in this case is going to be to pick the more complicated of the two sides. It's tough to know what to do with the secant theta, but there's lots that can be done with this more complicated side. So we're going to start out with that. Secant of theta minus 1 divided by 1 minus the cosine of theta. One thing you can do to get started is, you see there's a cosine here. If I replace this secant by 1 over the cosine, which is its definition, then I will have only cosines here, and we might be able to do some algebra there to reduce this to something that's easier to work with. So we will start out here with 1 over the cosine of theta minus 1 divided by 1 minus the cosine of theta. Now, if you look at this numerator, you can see we would like to combine these two terms, and one way of doing that is to replace this 1 by the cosine of theta divided by the cosine of theta. So what we'll have is 1 over cosine of theta minus the cosine of theta divided by the cosine of theta divided by 1 minus the cosine of theta. Now, your numerator here has common denominators, so you can combine those two terms and make them 1 minus the cosine of theta divided by the cosine of theta divided by 1 minus the cosine of theta. Now, you've heard of the expression invert and multiply. If we take this denominator and basically divide it by 1, you can divide anything by 1. Now what we're going to do to perform that division is we're going to take the first term, which is 1 minus cosine theta, over cosine theta, and we are going to multiply it by the reciprocal of this denominator, and that's the invert and multiply part, and this is 1 divided by 1 minus cosine of theta. And at this point, you see that there is light at the end of the tunnel because the 1 minus the cosine theta here will cancel with the 1 minus cosine theta there, and you are just left with 1 over the cosine of theta. Finally, the last step, you can now look at the target out here. You know that 1 over the cosine theta is equal to the secant of theta. And at this point, we have proven this particular trigonometric identity.